Oh, I want to thank you all for tuning into another edition of Outside the Shop with me, your host, Daryl D. Lane, where I get to talk about everything that I normally don't get to talk about on my regular sports podcast, Barbershop Sports Talk, which you can all find on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, whichever podcasting app or platform you may listen to me via. For the podcast I'm going to release on Wednesday, I'm going to have Chris Milholland on. He covers the Brooklyn Nets for the Nets Daily. We dive into James Harden. We also dive into Kyrie, all the craziness that's been going on with Kyrie, just how this whole Brooklyn Nets experiment is going to work. So definitely check that out. Will be a worthwhile conversation. Also, I'm going to have Silas on, my good friend Silas Garrison, and we're going to talk a little bit about Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, what's going on with both those two, with concussions and trade requests. Also, we're going to get Silas on the record. He's going to give, I think, 10, 15 predictions that he has for the NBA season. So if you want to hear what Silas's predictions are, that he wants to put on the record, he wants to come on the podcast, put his name on all of these so we can bring them all back to see what he was right on and what he was wrong on. So that will be what's going to be on the podcast on Wednesday. And also, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just type in Daryl Lane. I post clips from my podcast. Also, I upload this show here. So, here's what we got today. We got Bruce Arians kind of criticizing the New England way. We're going to get into that. Also, what's going on with the Tennessee Volunteers. Calvin Johnson being a Hall of Fame snub, talking about that. Also, towards the end, we're going to get into this. For those of you who don't know, the New York Mets GM got fired. And you want to know why? Sending nudes. So, very interesting show we have today. So let's start with this. Bruce Arians criticizes the New England Patriots, saying they didn't allow Tom Brady to coach. You know, it's really interesting when we look at all this. I think what makes Tom great, if you notice, Tom is going to be the first quarterback ever to start in a championship game in 3 different decades. The Tim Duncan-esque. Tim Duncan, for those of you who don't know, I believe he won an NBA championship in 3 different decades. And what I think what always made Greg Popovich and Tim Duncan work, and why maybe Tom Brady and Bill Belichick didn't work, is Greg Popovich always seemed to gush and have this allure, have this awe of Tom Brady, where it seems that, maybe Bill Belichick didn't have that for Tom and he didn't respect him. Like, you always hear this about Greg Popovich, I'm nothing without Timmy. Timmy did it all. You always hear that about Greg Popovich. You never really hear Bill Belichick stop and smell roses and say, hey, Tom did a lot of great things for the New England way. He did this, he did that. So it kind of shows that, obviously Tom was underappreciated. And obviously Bruce Arians is saying this because Tom Brady told him. I don't know if Tom Brady told him today. I don't know if he told it to him yesterday. I don't know if he told it to him when Tom Brady was in negotiations with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But he told him that. That was definitely mentioned. That's why Bruce Arians said it. Now, next up, what we have is this. Michael Thomas is going to have he's going to undergo surgeries in a couple weeks. They were basically saying that the reason that he had surgery was because, the reason he didn't have surgery is because he wanted to play with Drew Brees and get Drew a Super Bowl. Now, folks, I know we like to, and here's something I want to let everybody know. In the media, when a player has a bad performance, because Michael Thomas, this playoff game against the Buccaneers, he had 0 catches, goose egg, and then the report comes out that he wanted to play for Drew Brees. He had ligament issues. Not saying that none of that is true, but I'm just saying it's ironic how these reports come out after he has the 0 reception game and they lose in the playoffs. Let's just also remember, sometimes you go to your reporters that you like and you're like, hey, can we spin, kind of a nice little feature story about me, kind of get some sympathy. So I think that's what that is about. Also for the Buffalo Bills, Brian Dabol will be staying with the organization for another year. I don't think Brian Dabol's probably going to stay after that. He's going to be highly coveted in the coaching profession as a head football coach. The Eagles wanted to speak to Brian Dabol, but he was unwilling to do so and wants to finish it out with Josh Allen. I think Josh and Brian Dabol have a special connection. I think this also comes into question how the interview process in the NFL should probably start after the playoffs, because Brian Dabol is one of the hottest coordinators, and he couldn't really interview because he's in a playoff run. And I think out of respect to your team, the organization, you should be focusing on your current team, the current place that is employing you, that playoff run. So I think that kind of hurt Brian Dabol. I have no issues with it. I'm pretty sure the Buffalo Bills, Sean McDermott, Josh McDaniel have no issues with it. He will probably be back. He will probably be back again for the Bills. I don't think he'll stay after, like I said, but It's going to work out. It is going to work out, but he's going to be a really good coach. But I do also think what we need to look at, the NFL needs to look at changing how head coaches are hired till after the season, not after the postseason, not just in the midst of the postseason. Because I think it hurt a guy like Brian Dabol, who was definitely qualified. Next up, Calvin Johnson says he would take it as a slight if he was not a first ballot Hall of Famer. Now, I'm looking at the comments right now. Ted Myers, Calvin Johnson is the most talented wide receiver ever. Definite Hall of Famer, if not first ballot, second ballot for sure. And Ted, here's what I'm going to say about this. There are a lot of great receivers. And tell me if I'm wrong. T.O. was not a first ballot Hall of Famer. Shannon Sharp was not a first ballot Hall of Famer. Chris Carter was not a first ballot Hall of Famer. Now, I'm not saying that Calvin Johnson is better than all those guys or those guys were better. I'm just going to give you a list. I gave you 3 really good receivers / tight ends in this game that have won championships and have a lot of records that were not first ballot Hall of Famers. The only 2 people that I think in this Hall of Fame class that should be first ballot Hall of Famers are Peyton Manning 1, obviously, and Charles Woodson 2. After that, I don't know. We can talk a lot about Calvin's career. I think probably he should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I'm not going to beat the drum and be like, this is wrong, right? If Peyton Manning's a first ballot Hall of Famer, Charles Woodson's a first ballot Hall of Famer, to me, the committee's doing their job. Those are the 2 guys that should be slam dunk. Let's not discuss this first ballot Hall of Famers. Calvin, obviously, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame, but, Shannon Sharp, like I said, he's a third ballot. I think Chris Carter was like a 6th ballot Hall of Famer. And you have T.O., who's a third ballot Hall of Famer. And God have mercy, T.O. is arguably a top 3 wide receiver of all time. Shannon Sharp's arguably a top 3 tight end of all time. If these guys aren't first ballot Hall of Famers, then, Calvin, you might have to wait, and it's not the craziest thing in the world. Also, Eric Church and Jasmine Sullivan are going to sing the national anthem at the Super Bowl. I think that's going to be really interesting to hear. I want to get to basketball. So, the Brooklyn Nets. I was watching the Nets game when they played the Milwaukee Bucks. At first, I wasn't totally sold on what the Nets were doing. I think you have Kyrie. I think you have Harden. I think you have all these guys. KD, how does it work? But I'll tell you this. They're going to be able to score at will. Kyrie Irving is going to be their third option. Kyrie is going to be their third option. Kyrie is one of the best offensive basketball players ever, and he's going to be their third option. Guys like Joe Harris, who's one of the best 3-point shooters in the league, is going to get tons of open shots. This Brooklyn Nets team is going to get 130 easy a game. Now, I don't know if they're going to be able to defend, but here's the thing. They're going to be in matchups in the playoffs where it's like, we're going to keep going up and down this floor. We're going to keep getting in all these exchanges. And we can't play defense, but we know you can't stop us. And we know that we can get to 140. You might be only get to 130, but we'll take our chances. And you want to know what? It might work. Because KD, right now he's averaging 37 and 6 assists. On 54% shooting from the field and 48% from 3. Kevin Durant is back, folks. We see what James Harden's been doing. James Harden dropped a triple-double and hasn't even had a formal practice yet. So the Brooklyn Nets, watch out. They will be scary. But I also think something we do need to look at, maybe trade Kyrie. You see how Harden and Kevin Durant are playing? Why not trade Kyrie? I was talking to my friend Silas about this last night. I was like, could you imagine if you took out Kyrie for a Chris Paul? Like that type of guy? Just a guy that, is better defensively, that will get teammates involved. More of a leader, more of a guy that fits with the team. If you trade Kyrie for a couple of pieces, the Brooklyn Nets, I think, could be better off. But right now, there's no problem. When Kyrie is your issue, you're doing really well as an organization. Really well. So these, I always love lists like these where they do the value of these professional sports teams, and there was just a list done. The most valuable NBA franchise. I'm just going to read this to you. So number 1 is the Golden State Warriors at $5.21 billion. Number 2 is the Los Angeles Lakers at $5.14 billion. Number 3 is the Brooklyn Nets at 3.4 million. 3.4 million. Boston Celtics 3.18 million. Chicago Bulls at $3.14 million, Houston Rockets at $2.77 million, Los Angeles Clippers at $2.63 billion, Dallas Mavericks at $2.58 billion, Toronto Raptors at $2.55 billion, and those are all big markets. So I'm just going to give you the list again for all you guys in case you missed it. 1 is Golden State in terms of richest franchises. 1 is Golden State, 2 is the Lakers, 3 is the Nets, 4 is the Celtics, 5 is the Bulls, 6 is the Rockets, 7 is the Clippers, 8 is the Mavericks, and 9th is the Raptors. What do they all have in common? Big markets, right? I'm looking at this right now. So we have Golden State, we have the San Francisco area, we have LA, obviously, with the Clippers, Lakers, we have the Brooklyn Nets, New York Knicks, all on here, Dallas, Toronto, all big markets. Those franchises that make money, and I think the only time, like, You'll see sometimes like a Milwaukee with the Giannis or a Cleveland with LeBron, they'll get into the top 10 just by virtue of how good those players are. But besides that, you don't see that very much. Now, let's get to this. College football. Jeremy Pruitt got fired yesterday because Tennessee was paying players. On Dan Patrick's radio show, he mentioned that Tennessee, they were paying players in McDonald's back. They had dollars of cash on McDonald's bags. Now, first of all, let me tell you Tennessee's record. They were 3-7 last year. If they are paying players, they're doing a hell of an awful job. My God. Like, I know that Jeremy Pruitt also, he got fired because he wasn't cutting it at Tennessee. It's really funny. If you told me Kentucky basketball was paying players, I'd be like, okay. Makes sense. Duke basketball's paying players. Okay, that makes sense. You tell me that Alabama football's paying players. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Tennessee football is paying players. They're not doing it the right way. Their players suck. My God, they're not even cheating the right way. That's what I find funny about all this. You have the 3-7 team paying players. Georgia might be paying players. Ohio State might be paying players, but it's Tennessee. It's Tennessee. It's the team with the losing record that's paying players. Listen, if you're paying players, you should be getting 10 wins minimum. You should be getting 10 wins minimum, and you should be competing for a New Year's Six Bowl / college football playoff appearance if you're paying your players. That's what you need to do, because if you're not doing that, you're wasting your money as a football organization, as a college program. You're just wasting your money, wasting your time. And lastly, a really sad / disturbing story. So the Mets GM, Jared Porter, got fired by Stephen Cohen after sending explicit texts to a 2016 reporter, to a reporter in 2016. Now, I just want to read some of the details of this, and bear with me right here. And it's a little disturbing, by the way. So basically, they're talking, obviously in a professional sense, and then he gets it into his head that she wants, pictures of his genitalia, and he keeps sending it, and I have right here, 60 straight messages, unanswered messages of nudes, come on, man. And this is the thing in sports, obviously 20 years ago, stuff like that would be okay, but it's not okay now, and it's wrong, and he should have been fired, and it shows everybody things you do 5-6 years ago. 2016 wasn't that long ago. I was still in high school in 2016, can come back to haunt you, and you can lose your job. And this is a guy that was going to be a GM of a professional sports team, and now he's losing that opportunity because he did something really stupid, gross, and disgusting, and he's probably never going to get a job in sports again, and I hope he doesn't, because you need to tell people this is not acceptable, and female reporters shouldn't have to deal with that, right? They have a job to do and shouldn't have to deal with guys getting the wrong impression and sending the junk. Just not cool, just not right. And that's all we have for this edition of Outside the Shop. I'm looking at Joshua Unger's comment right now. It looks like I've been officially invited to the sports room. Josh, thank you. I will come on anytime. Just let me know. You have me on Facebook, DM me in the messenger. Also, like I said, check out my sports podcast, Barbershop Sports Talk, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, the whole deal. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just type in Daryl Lane, post clips for my podcast. Also, I upload this show right here. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Have a great day, and God bless.